problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country. Now, this is a place for you to be in the know on the matters that matter most to producing and marketing the finest food and fibre that is fit for a better world in, of course, uncertain times. Now, uncertainty, they always bring that one friend to the party that nobody likes. Anxiety. Anxiety is like that obnoxious loudmouth that won't shut up until certainty and his mate influence walk into the room and they let serenity speak. Am I sounding a little bit airy-fairy and far-fetched? Well, you are only here for one reason to watch or listen to Sarah's Country live or on demand. You believe in finding the certainty that even in the eye of the storm, land is in sight, and we are weathering this storm together, which way the water is being hurled at us. Now, it's great to have the facts of what's happening, as grim as the short term can be, but it is also great to appreciate when organisations are genuinely working in your best interest. And never lose sight of course, celebrating the success and innovation of others around us, as we will do here tonight and every night on Sarah's Country. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, hoping to bring about change to a lot of issues, mindsets, and of course, how you consume your rural content online. So for those of you new to the show, welcome. We have a very engaged community live with us every night, Monday through Thursday from 7 p.m, where it's all about your thoughts on the matters and of course putting those important questions to our industry leaders and guests across the show. So, of course, comments below on Facebook, on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you're watching across the web. I want to hear from you tonight. Now, we have been moving towards putting the consumer at the forefront of our decisions for some time now. But yesterday's government release of the Primary Sector Council's roadmap to accelerate the vision fit for a better world talks about how we need to be even more consumer-led. It got me thinking tonight as I was making my fresh start, my food bag dinner for one, perfectly portioned for my needs as a consumer in this millennial world. Now, it was McGill's Butchery, New Zealand's premium artisan pulled pork, ready to go and make in under 20 minutes. I told my mum about this. My mum, traditional woman of the land, growing and eating from the land. She said, "What's wrong with a veggie garden?" She said, "Have you heard of New World?" Now, mums, I've learned, aren't always right, and especially when it comes to understanding how the world is no longer being told how to consume. They are driving it with their wallets. And if New Zealand is fit for this new world, we need to be up with it or we will be left behind. I want to know from you, firstly, simply one question, because I know you all know the answer to this, but also because it is a nice way to get you going. I want to know where you are watching or listening as you're cooking your dinner tonight from. It gives me and Joel a sense that we're not alone in the studio at Lincoln University campus all by ourselves, and it's nice to see the spread, depth and breadth around the country. Now, second question, do you do home delivery food or beverage? If so, what? And what do you love about it? Is it Wine Friend, a curated wine selection delivered to your door? Or have you had a go at ordering meat online from Silverfern Farms or First Light? How have your habits changed? Has COVID changed your habits maybe? I'd love to know what you love ordering online. It could just be that one little treat. I order increasingly so many things online. I've set up an auto delivery for my dog biscuits from Pet Direct. I buy my makeup on auto purchase from Strawberry Net. And I couldn't find something I wanted the other day, New World. So in New World, I went and found it on Instagram and bought it then and there, standing in New World. Now, this is the New World. See what I did there, Joel? That we live in. Joel, what did you order online last? Food-wise, we don't need to know all the details.
Wow. All right. Okay then. So I don't get my shopping delivered, but once a week or so we'll get a takeaway. So I mean, I live in the city centre and there's takeaways everywhere. Or no, there's
you could
cafes.
Walk to them.
Exactly. I could walk across the road and be at the market, but once a week we'll probably get a takeaway from the Chinese just because it's convenient.
Now, for those of our older generation, when you say takeaway, you mean delivered to your door.
Yeah, and like I very rarely would phone them up. I'll use something like Uber Eats or something, or Flamingo or one of those apps. And
Flamingo, that's a new one.
It's the same ones that do the scooters as well. Yeah, so it's like you almost don't have to talk to someone except the guy dropping the pizza off. So,
do you talk to them?
I do. Like, I'll have a chat to them, like see how their night's going.
They're trying to get away from me. I want to know, their background, how they came to this country, what they love about their job, and they're like, thanks, ma'am. Here's your food.
Yeah, leave me alone now.
Yeah, leave me alone now. No, I make this point to appreciate that if we are heading into the direction of what our consumer wants, we are on the right track to that word, certainty. Tonight, one man has certainty. He is the Guinness World Record holder of the amount of wheat he produced last year, right here in New Zealand. Mid-Canterbury arable farmer Eric Watson will join us after 7:20 live to take your questions and mine on how he managed to do this. This is to produce 17.393 tonne per hectare. We need to be precise when it's a world record. Now, this is smashing his own record in 2017. I'm very much looking forward to having Eric on the show. Ospri are working to up their ante and improve the communication with farmers, is particularly following that TB outbreak blunder in Hawke's Bay earlier this year. They will place general managers in each region to work on closer stakeholder engagement, but not everyone's convinced. We will be joined by a CE for Ospri, Steve Stuart, after 7:30. And we're going to ask how the carrot versus stick approach is going to work. Now, to close, the main bobby calf season is almost upon us, but export markets are still heavily affected by COVID-19, leading to some concern about prices. And of course, AgriHQ commentators are saying this is going to have a massive flow-on effect to the calf rearing market. BX Foods have pulled completely out of taking bobby calves because of a collapsed veal market. Sales and marketing manager Jared Bry is going to join us because I want to hear what's happening and get a bit of a lay of the land. But first up tonight, after another day, another government announcement. Remember, they do have $20 billion to dish out before the election, and that's only 72 days away. Today's announcement was $761 million into a much-needed upgrade into our water services across the country. Irrigation New Zealand is pleased to see this government expenditure on water services, but calls still for a joined-up approach. CEO for Irrigation New Zealand, Liz Soal, is going to join us after the break. This is Sarah's Country.
We're a large deer farm and very proud deer farmer at that. I grew up here as a little boy. It is just an amazing lifestyle. I could never live in a city ever again. Just the big open spaces and just the peacefulness of it all. I think deer are very majestic, very intelligent animal. Having deer that are under pressure or anything like that, or overstocked, they really don't perform as well. You should really be spreading them out on beautiful pastures, keeping them happy. A happy deer is a good deer. And good feed, good grass. We renew our pastures all the time in the paddocks, so we're always getting the best quality grass. Well, I guess in the wild, they don't have the luxury of the grass that we put in front of them here as a farmed animal. I believe we've got some of the best English type deer in the country, if not the world. And to associate our brand with Silver Fern Farms brand works for us. Without the likes of Silver Fern Farms, then there's no point doing this. So they're very, very important for us. I'm Mark Tapley, very proud suppliers venison to Silver Fern Farms.
Irrigation New Zealand believe the government's investment into water is a step in the right direction, but they believe that a broader strategy, including a focus on water storage and, of course, policy development, is much needed. This is following today's announcement from Jacinda Ardern of a further $761 million put into much needed water infrastructure, particularly in urban areas. So joining us now to discuss this and much more is CEO for Irrigation New Zealand, Elizabeth Soal. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So there seems to continuously be a lot of headlines that have water in them. Of course, the Fit for a Better World roadmap yesterday seriously concentrated on water storage, which is fantastic. So where are we still not getting it right?
Well, I think that we are getting it right in terms of some of the individual announcements that we've been seeing coming out of government. So like you say, there's Fit for a Better World roadmap, which came out yesterday, which puts in water storage as a transformational opportunity, and it highlights the investment that has been made thus far through the Provincial Growth Fund into water storage. And then today we've had the announcement around Three Waters. So the government is investing, like you say, millions of dollars into infrastructure development and reform of the Three Waters sector, which is wastewater, drinking water and stormwater. We've also seen the Essential Freshwater Policy Package come out. And we've also seen the development of the Taumata Aroa, which is the new Drinking Water Authority. What we would like to see, though, is something overarching all of these developments, the funding, the policy developments, and the roadmaps into one strategy around water for the whole country, so that we know which direction we're going in. There's still potential for piecemeal projects to get funding and to go ahead, which is great, but we see that there's real opportunity for bringing all those different aspects together under one overarching strategy.
And what would that department, in your mind, that was responsible, focused purely on this water storage, be able to, sorry, not the department being focused on water storage, but the department overarching, fundamentally operationally look like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's a tough one to answer, because at the moment, if we look across government, there's multiple departments that have responsibility for aspects around water policy and water management. So we've got Department of Internal Affairs, which does local government, so therefore Three Waters. Ministry for the Environment sets the environmental policies. MPI are responsible for the primary sector, the users of water in terms of irrigation. So we've got a range of government departments that have different responsibilities at the moment, and that's where a overarching sectoral strategy would be good, so that we can better align all the work that's happening across those different government agencies to ensure that they're happening, dovetailing together essentially, and we're not putting in place regulations in one area that are going to prevent or stymie development in another area, for instance.
Have you felt that the government has shifted in the understanding of how water is interlinked from obviously snow through to the catchment at the river mouth, and all of the stakeholders involved with the development of the concept around Three Waters?
Yeah, so Three Waters, as I say, does cover stormwater, drinking water and wastewater, but it is, like you say, primarily an urban focus. It doesn't necessarily encapsulate rural water or water provided in rural areas for irrigation, or even for smaller drinking water community supplies. So we see that there is opportunity to broaden the scope of the mandate around water infrastructure, so that it does include water storage for multiple benefits, not just for urban water, but for the environment, for Māori, for reallocation, for irrigation, for even recreation.
Yes, absolutely. And so intertwined with rural water, and how they are interlinked from a water quality perspective through to an allocation perspective. Do you think that we're getting closer to an understanding of that relationship?
Yeah, we are, and we've seen that the government has announced its Essential Freshwater Package, which focuses on water quality, and that is urban and rural to some extent, but water quantity allocation, so how we determine how water should be used, aside from the water quality impacts of that water use, is yet to be determined, and the government has said that that will be the next round of policy development. So it's going to be really interesting to see how those two work together and how that, again, like I say, works in with these announcements around infrastructure, with the announcements around water storage for boosting productivity in the primary sector. How is that all going to come together in a cohesive strategy?
The reason I ask that is there is an article out on Farmers Weekly titled Two Funds to Support River Projects, where the Rangataki River Catchment Collective Chair Roger Dalrymple has come out saying that there's two identical programs to encourage effectively the same thing. And your push for a water commission and would, of course, encapsulate water in all its aspects, would it not?
That's right. So we're seeing, as I said earlier, potentially piecemeal projects and funding going to individual projects, which is a good thing, but can we do it better strategically so we have investment programs that are bigger and potentially of a wider scale and really guiding localised decision making? So there is the potential under the new water infrastructure and water delivery framework that's been announced today, because we could have joined up regional water authorities. So there is scope under that mechanism to ensure that water investment happens at a larger scale and is able to not be constrained by some of the things that we've seen holding back funding decisions at the local level in the past.
And of course, regulation decisions, the RMA reforms are hot on the table at the moment, and we're seeing some examples of some, ironic situations where Minister for the Environment David Parker has said his reforms would put environment above all else. That's social impact, economic impact. However, when it comes to a situation like water allocation from the Waikato River to Auckland City Council, there's a lot of angry Waikato farmers there who've been sitting waiting in line for some time.
Yeah, that's right. And this is where we're seeing some of the fragmentation of our water, our approach to water management and water policy happening. So we're seeing that because Auckland has an immediate crisis that needs to be addressed, absolutely. What's been in train for a long time are applications to get water out of the Waikato River system. And it's seen that essentially what's happened is that the one that was in the queue for Auckland has kind of jumped ahead to fix the immediate crisis that they're facing. If we had a more integrated approach, we might be able to plan better into the future, because under climate change scenarios, those sort of instances where we're seeing regionalised water shortages are going to happen more often.
Now, lastly, I don't want to obviously politicise water. We've done enough of that over the last 3 to 5 years, Liz. However, I mean, you've been sitting, knocking on the door and I'm sure sitting around the table with this coalition government. But have you been having conversations across all parties as they start to really heat up their campaign promises?
Absolutely. So it's a real important focus for us in the lead up to the election, and we'll be releasing our election manifesto shortly, which sets out our sort of 5 key asks of an incoming government and what we would like to see in terms of irrigation and water infrastructure. But certainly we talk to all political parties, whether in government or in opposition, to find out what their priorities are and to really work on behalf of our members to ensure that policies are robust, effective, workable, and that we're really doing what we can to improve the well-being of New Zealand. And we know that irrigation is a critical part of that, and so that's the message that we're pushing.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Chief Executive Elizabeth Soal of Irrigation New Zealand, and a bit of an update there on where their policy direction is lying, and of course, pre-election, but of course off the back of the Fit for a Better World announcement yesterday and today's announcement of $761 million from Jacinda into improved water infrastructure, of course naturally off the back of some of those horrendous situations we saw in Havelock North with an outbreak there in terms of human health. Now coming up, I'm sure water had a thing to do with New Zealand's next Guinness World Record. Ashburton farmer Eric Watson has today been officially announced and broke his own record. This time 17 point, and when it's Guinness Book of Records you have to be precise, 17.393 tonnes per hectare of wheat. Now, of course, for those to put in context, 12 tonne is the average for irrigated wheat yield here in New Zealand, in comparison to around the 3 to 4 tonne per hectare from our Australian cousins. An incredible result. We will get your questions and, of course, a few of mine to Eric coming up in Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Balance has its own team of innovation specialists. It's our job to lead the way, working with some of the most cutting-edge science and research. We've got partnerships with some of the best suppliers in the world, so our farmers get the very best products for New Zealand farms.
And in every region across the country, the conditions are very different, and farmers' and growers' needs are too.
That's why we're always looking for solutions that are just right, like here at our Huntly Service Centre.
And here in Canterbury, we've got a self-service silo, so I can pick up fert when it suits me.
And here in Morrinsville, we've got a world-class mill. That means that we can safely deliver our customers with the freshest, highest quality feed and minerals.
It's about putting the customer first because that's what drives our business.
We've been focusing on faster turnaround of orders. We've got to get the right products to the right places at the right times.
Here in Taranaki, we've got New Zealand's only urea manufacturing plant. It's where we create our premium sustained fertiliser.
We're supplying nationwide and working locally. By getting to know you and what you want to achieve, we can help you get there.
And with the new My Balance platform, Balance has put my farm at my fingertips.
In fact, we offer support in all sorts of ways, sharing the best nutrition practice with farming families across the country. Whether we're talking about animal health, farm productivity,
or looking after our natural environment, sustainability underpins everything we do. We use our local expertise and the latest tools to help farmers and growers navigate the changing regulations, so you can leave your farm in great shape for the future.
And we can be really accurate, avoiding areas like wetlands and waterways with our award-winning Spread Smart tech. It makes the job far safer, more efficient, and gives you the best results.
When you've got access to that kind of know-how, you've got the support you need to make sure you're farming sustainably. It's that kind of thinking that'll keep us going for generations to come.
Together creating the best soil and feed on earth.
Welcome back to Sarah's Country. Now, of course, tonight in the comments below, the theme is we're talking around food delivery. I do genuinely appreciate it. It's not something that's of ease in rural delivery in terms of fresh and chilled products. And when you can get those types of products, it is an absolute game changer for certain consumers wherever they are. And I'm just sort of wondering, is there a way that we can kind of boost that ability? But then when you're on farm, you've got access to such beautiful chilled and fresh meat and produce from the garden as well. It's just these sort of millennial busy people like myself that absolutely loving things like my food bag since I've moved into town. I've got to make the most of living in town. You know, a few things are a bit better. Now, of course, Briar Property, sorry I don't have your first names there, said that they love ordering Ruahine port from the Hawke's Bay and say that you just can't buy any better port. I'd love to challenge you. I know where there's a really good port. Of course, the duck shooters port and stag hunters. They've made a trout one. This is all from Tankeriff Wines in Central Otago, made from Pinot Noir. Absolutely beautiful port. But of course, I've heard good things about Ruahine port as well. Now, so I'd love to know about some consumer trends. Is there anything that you've decided to start ordering online just to make life just that little bit easier? Even if it is simply that click and collect, it's one less job. I know that that type of thing is certainly very good for budgeting as well, especially when you've got a large household. So, you know, these technologies has created a new way of us consuming. So I'd love to know what is some of those ways that you are starting to operate online. And Michael Ross has sent through some very good questions for the Ospri CEO, who is coming up in the show. Michael, I have to sadly say that Steve was pre-recorded earlier today. He couldn't join us live. However, some of your questions here are very, very good questions of what I'm going to copy and paste and send on to the comms manager there at Ospri, because they are very, very good questions in the comments. Now it's time to be joined by New Zealand's latest Guinness World Record holder, straight out of Ashburton, Eric Watson. Good evening, Eric. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good evening.
Good. You've mastered joining us on your iPad. Am I correct?
It's not me. It's somebody else that's done the work, but I am here, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really genuinely appreciate it. I'm sure there must be a few bubbly around, but I understand this isn't your first rodeo, having a wheat yield record globally.
No, we broke the record in 2017 and then again this year. So, yeah, it's the second time we've broken it.
And back in 2017, what was that yield?
16.791 tonnes per hectare.
So
and this year,
yep.
This year it's 17.398 tonnes a hectare.
And this isn't the first time a New Zealander has won. It's certainly been, the trophy's been in this part of the world quite a few times.
Yes, I think from memory, possibly 3 or 4 times, I think, from what I memory recall, yes.
Okay, and considerably above our industry average of 12 tonne per hectare, and of course the lower yields in Australia as well. Now, I suppose the first question is it really just about chasing that particular record or extending those cultivars so that we can improve our yields across the industry?
No, it's about extending the cultivar so that we can extend the yield. We go out to try and get a yield, but we do nothing differently to achieve that yield. What we do is what we do normally. So it's just the cultivar makes a difference, and that certainly helps. It's just about extending that or getting the best out of that cultivar, I would say, to get that high yield.
Now, I know there'll be viewers watching that may have questions, and I just want to firstly encourage them to please put them in the comments, and I'll try my best to get the questions to Eric, because I know there'll be a lot of people wondering how. Was it particularly out-of-the-box season?
It was a very good season. Canterbury in general had a very good grain growing season or cropping season. It was never too hot, but we had a lot of sun at grain-fill time, so we got a station and dewy nights. That certainly helped. So yeah, it was probably an exceptionally good season, probably one of the best seasons we've had for a number of years. And it was dry. I mean, it was dryish, but not too dry. Of course, we've got irrigation, so that all helped as well. So yeah, it was a brilliant season, really.
Okay, talking about cultivars, what was this particular one?
This was a cultivar called Karen, which is bred by a KWS variety out of the UK. So it's UK feed wheat.
And naturally, you think high yields, there must be a high level of nitrogen being poured onto it. How did you monitor that and the environmental impact as well?
Well, we do deep soil nitrogen tests in the late winter, early spring, so that we know it gives us a guide to what's in the soil. And we only apply what the crop needs. I mean, we were aiming for 17 tonne, perhaps 16 tonne. So we only applied 305 kilograms of actual nitrogen per hectare, which is probably normal for us in the situation because the paddock had a reasonably high residual. And that worked out at 22 kilograms per tonne of grain yield. So, and we do get very good mineralisation on these soils. In fact, over the years, we have cut our nitrogen back a wee bit on wheat because we're finding we were overdosing and just wasting it. So, yeah, it was a pretty, a very good use of nitrogen we felt this year.
And what about your use of irrigation?
Well, it's extensively monitored by neutron probes through Aqualink or Hydro Services Aqualink, and we only irrigate to what's required. We certainly don't over-irrigate, and the crop only had 160 millimetres of actual irrigation this year, applied in 4 applications. So, yeah, and the crop at one or two stages during the growing season was actually under stress with the monitoring that we do. So everything's pretty much monitored. We certainly don't overuse water.
And of course, that environment for pests. How did you manage the agronomy around the crop protection?
Well, we do. I mean, the area we're in, and the variety is a wee bit susceptible to disease. So it actually had 5 fungicides, which is probably we do that to some of our other wheat crops, depending on how resistant they are to disease. So yeah, it had 5 fungicides, and we do get a wee bit of early fusarium and stuff like that. So we had to put on an early fungicide.
As we say, the New Zealand is absolutely leading the way in terms of our global arable markets with our yield per hectare. What do you think is achievable into the future? Are we still going to continue to chase tonne per hectare, or do you think there is starting to become a consumer-led change in other things?
Well, I think the potential is still there. I mean, FAR had a program of 20 tonne by 2020, and I know Rothamsted's trying to get 20 tonne at some stage. So I think it's achievable, but it's going to take breeding. Plant breeding will help that, newer fungicides perhaps, but we've also got to be in mind that it's got to be sustainable production and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think, I don't know. It's a hard one to quantify or to come to grips with what the potential is, and I suppose as long as the yield keeps going up every year or slightly up, if it's a good season for you, and that's mostly related to variety.
Certainly, and I've got a question here come in about what's involved in how competitive it is with a world record, especially you start to get to know the handful of players that are all trying to compete against each other each year around the world.
Well, it's very involved, and I mean, I couldn't do it without the support of Bayer because, I mean, they pay all the bills, and that's fairly substantial. But yeah, everything has to be quantified, and you're certainly not allowed to use over the label rates for that country, and you've got to follow industry guidelines, so you don't not using too many products once or twice, most of them, because you don't want to induce resistance to lots of septoria or insect resistance. So you've got to be careful with what you use, and I think that plays a big part in it.
I do have to ask, you just said in terms of paying the bills and that goal of 20 tonne by 2025, how do we make it stack up in terms of profit margins and the costs going into these types of yields?
Well, I think you can't afford to apply anything that's not necessary. So I think if you happen to get 20 tonne, if it's a breeding variety or an exceptional year, I mean, I think it's going to take a long time to get to 20 tonne over likes of 8 hectares. But I think you just got to be mindful of your input costs. And to me, yield is always king for us. We're getting the same inputs whether we're getting 16 tonne or 17 tonne. So. And the higher the yield, the more money we tend to make, or try to make anyway. So,
especially when we've got ambitious goals to have 100% New Zealand wheat in our bread here in New Zealand, because a lot of people don't know that we import a lot of wheat for our flour and our bread here in New Zealand. So, of course, yield is one way of being able to achieve that.
Yes, and the bread, the milling wheats is always slightly lower yielding than the feed wheats, and it's just part of the breeding process. So, but yeah, I think and it's going to take a long time. I'm not sure whether we'll ever get back to 100% of New Zealand wheat and bread at this stage.
Oh, we certainly have to have aspirations, as you have, and of course the team at Bayer that have been working very closely beside you and your team there, Eric. Can I just say, on behalf of Sarah's Country's audience, congratulations on a huge achievement today.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks, Tart. Thank you.
Thank you, and well done on navigating that iPad, Eric. It was much appreciated. Now, of course, I'm taking your comments below. We're talking around food delivery and what sort of things have you started. It might not be fresh food. It could be things like, as we've had here, ordering port, or is it, of course, ordering some wine? What sort of online behaviours and shopping habits have you taken up? I just have to give a plug now to my after work job that happens at 8:30, where tonight you can join us, the Shepherdess second edition of their magazine launch live online. I'd like to take the time to invite you all. You can go to Shepherdess on YouTube or Shepherdess on Facebook, and you can watch us for an hour where we hear from four different women that feature in the magazine, and it's absolutely fantastic. The reason I'm joining that in is because the amazing entrepreneurial skills that are coming out of our rural women, it just blows me away. Every time on Instagram I see a new beautiful luxurious product that is being sold online straight out of the back blocks of rural New Zealand. So join us 8:30 tonight, Shepherdess magazine launch. Of course, as I said there, Shepherdess on YouTube or on Facebook. Now coming up after the break, excuse me, I'm just going to we are going to be talking to CEO for Ospri, Steve Stuart. And as I mentioned there before, I do need to make sure you know that it was pre-recorded. So unfortunately, I can't take your questions for Steve. We are going to understand how he wants to have more engagement with communities by putting some new general managers in the regions. I'd love to hear your thoughts after this, right after the break.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Well, no doubt it has been a rough couple of years for Ospri prior to our next guest coming on board. But there certainly is an effort to change in terms of the structure and, of course, the communication approach to not only farmers but also community stakeholders such as regional councils. Joining us now from Wellington is Chief Executive of Ospri, Steve Stuart. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Karen.
Hey, now there has been a bit of a rough start for you this year, and that's COVID aside. This outbreak in Hawke's Bay wasn't that enjoyable, I'm sure, for your team.
Well, not just our team. It's less enjoyable for farmers who have got TB. You know, every farm that gets TB has a big impact on the farmer, his family, and the communities. And so, you know, it's something that really worries us and something we work really hard to try and avoid.
Yes.
But when it does come, we work really hard to try and get on top of it quickly.
And of course, not only the flow-on effect to those that become under lockdown, especially over that time that compounded with M. bovis eradication and, of course, that backlog from the processes over COVID.
Yes. And so, you get a head of steam up and then COVID comes along and you've got to pull back a bit. And so then you've got to catch up again. So, you know, when you think around the Hawke's Bay, for example, they've had COVID, they've had bovis, they've got TB, they've got the drought, you know. It's almost a perfect storm. You couldn't have scripted that day any worse, really.
Excuse me. What was your biggest learnings from being physically on the ground and hearing from farmers' frustrations around where Ospri could pick up its socks?
Oh, look, the emotions are pretty raw, and they come at you, really directly. It's the impact on farmers and their families, impacts on communities. Farmers felt, and probably rightly so, that we didn't act quick enough. They felt a bit let down that TB had come back into an area which was once previously clear of TB. So they were pretty upset about that, and talking with them and seeing their land and seeing the impacts really does bring home to you what an important job we need to do to make sure it doesn't come back again.
There is certainly still some critics out there, rightly so, in the region of Ospri's, of course, attempt to improve. And there is a regional strategy putting extension managers on the ground. How is that going to make a difference?
Well, it's not so much the regional people on the ground so much. It's that in the past we've tried to run the country from Wellington, and I don't think that's the right strategy. I think when you're trying to deliver service to your customers and your customers are your farmers, you need to be out there connecting with them and be close with them so you can be more responsive and agile and get the intelligence back from them that allows you to perform better and deliver better services. And so the strategy is around putting managers and leaders that are accountable back out in the regions, that take ownership of whole regions, that can deliver value and services to farmers. And as I say, I can't do that from my office here in Wellington.
Now, of course, when yourself and, of course, incoming Chair Barry Harris came into Ospri, there certainly was a different place and a different culture than I'm sure that you would like to go forward. You're appointing 3 regional managers. How much of it is just a restructure internally or bringing in new blood?
Oh, look, we're appointing general managers that are going to be based in the regions, and there's a really good reason for that. It matters is that the general managers in the regions sit on the senior leadership team of Ospri, and therefore bring a national and regional perspective to their work. Right? What we were looking for is leaders that collaborate, that build relationships, and that can connect with the customers that basically pay our levies to deliver services to. So it's very, very important that we have people that can do that, and that's certainly what we're looking for in the leaders in the regions.
And of course, farmers will be looking to see some tangible impact from their levy money. What will they physically notice apart from more people driving around in branded up Ospri trucks?
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do is so farmers have a range of compliance obligations. They have, we need to educate them and support them to get things right. So, in the example of traceability, for example, yes, it can be a bit of a clunky system and it can be a little bit difficult. And our role is to educate and work with farmers to enable them to get their traceability systems right and to make sure they're recording their animal movements, etc. So what you'd like to see is more presence for when people ask for help, more responsive Ospri when people do ask for help. But also, better connections with not just farmers, but with the likes of regional and district councils and city councils. For example, also foresters, and other people, DOC and other agencies that all do some sort of pest control. We should be joining up with them to deliver coordinated services to farmers. And that's what I hope we'll sort of start to punch into and start to take some ownership of.
Okay, and of course, while we've got you here, TB is one thing, but of course the uptake of NATE compliance. We had a great catch up with Kevin Ford, the head of NATE, and what a great appointment having somebody heading up that. But are you, when you were last, it's probably, am I guessing, 14 to 18 months since you've come into the role there, Steve, noticed a tangible difference in change and uptake in some of those changes you've made?
Yes, look, I mean, NATE is important. I think it's a tool. I think anything COVID has taught us is that traceability tools are important for managing diseases, and there's a lot of parallels to human disease and animal diseases. But the point about NATE is and Ospri is that we don't do it by ourselves. We work with MPI, for example. We work through our shareholders channels. We work with a whole range of people to support farmers to get their NATE accounts right. And so part of us going into the regions is to sort of amplify and accelerate that process so that farmers can get on top of their native accounts quickly, and we have, what we hope will be, and I'm sure will be in time, a world-class traceability system.
And I know that our viewers will be wanting to keep writing to find out where the development continues with the EASD forms and where we are with that technology. What can you update us on today?
Yeah, so the idea of the NATE system is to incorporate EASD into the ultimate NATE system. So you have an end-to-end recording system, and remove duplication and remove different systems and bring them together so you have an end-to-end system. So we are now building an EASD, which we will integrate into the broader NATE system to deliver that end-to-end solution. So that's a good thing. And, again, during COVID, when people were reluctant to use documents, electronic documents came into their own, and we hope they're right on the back of that.
And now, just lastly, on behaviour change in terms of a carrot versus stick approach, how much work are you doing with regards to the importance of traceability through blockchain technology, market access, and some of these supply chain agreements and the accreditation programs with our processors who want that absolute depth of traceability?
Well, look, New Zealand has, as you know, has a fantastic brand and reputation overseas, and people trust that we have good systems in behind it. And traceability is one of those systems that give international markets confidence that they know where their products are coming from. It's world-class products. And we want to play into that space. And absolutely, we think, international markets value things like good traceability, and that's where NATE comes into its own.
Absolutely, and I can't wait for that day where it doesn't become another box-ticking exercise, that there is an incentive-driven appetite from farmers to ensure that we have the world-class traceability standards. Steve, I wish you all the best with your general managers on the ground, and I ask farmers to support Ospri's move to be closer and better at communicating with its stakeholders on the ground. Anything is a positive in the right direction from where we've come from with this particular organisation. So thank you so much for your time. Chief Executive of Ospri, Steve Stuart, joining there. And now coming up after the break, talking about our international markets, one that is not looking very flash at all is our market for veal. And it is having a massive flow-on effect back here for our appetite for bobby calves and raising calves this year, with very low store prices being bandied around in that space. And dare I say it, the flow-on effect of animal welfare cases that may come out of this. We're going to be joined by BX Foods Sales and Marketing Manager Jared Bryant from BX Foods, as I said, just talking about that global marketplace and why they have decided to pull out completely of taking bobby calves, and what that looks like going into the next 6 months. All that coming up on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. Do you reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell compound to leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You caught a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Welcome back to Sarah's Country. Now, of course, to close the show, we have an interesting topic coming up with regards to bobby calves. I just want to get to some of the questions here in the comments before we get on to our last guest. Now, Michael Ross has put a very good question in here. I just actually wanted to read out, of course, that last interview was pre-recorded, and I will pass these questions on to Ospri, because that's what Sarah's Country is all about, is connecting you with industry leaders. But a good point. What steps have been taken to ensure forest landowners in that area comply with their wildlife obligations under the Biosecurity Act? of course, when you have sheep and beef properties being neighboured by increasingly sprawling forestry blocks, controlling TB and eradicating it by 2026 is going to be even more challenging. And so, of course, I'd love to know that personally myself as well. So, of course, we're also... your mother's dropped back in the comments, Joel. He's not surprised. She loves donuts, but she blames your sister. Donut delivery. Oh, what a great way to keep warm in winter with some extra layers of fat there, Joanne Rock.
Yeah, it's summer there though. So.
Of course, and she has her long walks on the beach every morning, of course. Now, as we said, turning to bobby calves. With bobby calf returns are now down in the dumps, and processors are signalling this season's price will be lower again than last year. Last season's price was already at a tipping point, so taking it any lower is going to mean dairy farmers are going to be incentivised to euthanise on farm rather than rearing the calves to 4 days, particularly for farms facing a massive staff shortage with, of course, COVID and our borders being closed, or with longer trucking distances now to processors. On-farm slaughter is unpalatable for many farmers, even if it means producing 4-day-old calves at a financial loss. Now, global markets for veal are driving this. Joining us now to discuss the situation is Sales and Marketing Manager for BX Foods, Jared Breyer. Jared, BX Foods have pulled out of the bobby calf market. Is this because of the global situation? What is happening with veal?
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for the opportunity to join us today. So, yes, BX Foods is not processing bobby calves this coming season, primarily due to a plant reconfiguration at Ospri. Okay. We've processed bobby calves there for the last 5 or 6 years, quite successfully, and I believe we could have done so again this year. But just struggling with how we were going to manage reconfiguration of the plant as we increase some capacity there for our bovine production, both cows and steers. So as far as what's happening in the market, you did sum it up, there is a lot going on, and it is quite an uncertain environment within which we're operating. And we can lay that primarily at the door of COVID. The byproducts you mentioned, probably halving in return, maybe back 3/4 to a half, whether it's serum, bones or skin. And then the cuts, which, as we know, returns are significantly reduced by lower demand from the food service and restaurant sector around the world. So yes, it is tough times, and the meat companies are signalling maybe returns will be back, which is a concern for what happens on farm. I guess that from a meat company's point of view, they sort of feel the need to give the signal to the sector so that there's no surprises as we move forward, as we ask for transparency sort of throughout the supply chain.
Now, of course, bobby calf kill season is used by many processing plants to tie over from processing sheep over the winter and keep your skilled labour employed. Could you expand a bit when you mean about your processing plants restructuring and so therefore flow-on effect to your operations in general?
Yeah, sure. So our primary production at Oamaru is we'll focus on lamb and mutton over this next few months, and there will be a reduction on the hours that the plant is operating, which will hit those in the pocket. This is particularly through September. But there'll be work each week regardless. But we'll be doing work around that as we expand the plant, which currently lacks a dedicated beef boning room. Which is something we're rolling out, making a start on next month.
Okay, absolutely.
As far as from an industry point of view, to your question about use of labour through that period, yes, bobby calves have fulfilled a very important role. When we processed the last couple of years around 1.75 million bobby calves across the nation, about 1 million in the North Island and 750,000 in the South, and certainly that's a lot of product. And filled an important period that really is the depths of winter. Otherwise, from a processing point of view, starting in sort of late August down south, but really begins very shortly in the north, and sort of follows that weather pattern through the south and sort of dribbles out into October, as we can all picture the old cows calving period through this spring period that's nearly upon us.
Now, of course, for our calf rearers and going on to our beef finishers and that bull market as well, what sort of certainty or crystal ball glazing can you give for the correction back in the global beef markets for people to hold on, especially when there's very tight winter feed around?
Good question. Big question. Wish I had that. Wish I had all the answers right there. I do think that with the uncertainty of the last 4 months or so and reduced capacity, global uncertainty with COVID through manufacturing sites in the States, uncertainty as to how much, even though that's obviously corrected in the short term, uncertainty as to where those issues are going to sit with us all in the coming months, or dare I say it, years, God forbid. It is pleasing to see a lack of inventory through Asia, other than maybe China, which continues, I should speak about China for a moment, continues to have massive uptake in its beef imports, even this year. And nice to see that the price there on pork's up 35% in the last 8 weeks, is starting to translate back into the red meat, which is good to see. But generally speaking, looking forward, I think as we look at recovery across some of these different economies, we'll always see the manufacturing trade do well. Manufacturing trade in regards to the manufacturing meat and the hamburger patty, of course, QSRs, that sort of thing. So I think we're sitting in a pretty good space, talking 18 months, 2 years out, and so we should continue to have confidence that things will be sitting quite well. Underlying fundamentals remain. African swine fever, we'll see Chinese production back maybe 20% this year. We've still got a fair way to ride out the issues that's brought about. So we sort of maybe lose sight of that as COVID consumes a lot of the conversation.
While you're undergoing your plant's sort of what's the word? Sorry, I've just lost it. Reconfiguration. There we go. I had some big words tonight. How much is that is going to focus on some more consumer-led, as there's been a real swing from that food service into retail and particularly e-commerce for someone like BX Foods and it's not relying necessarily on that manufacturing beef trade?
I don't think necessarily the reconfiguration itself is going to be so focused in that regard. It has become more and more a part of our business naturally, however. So we're starting to sort of took a bit of a lead out of the MLA book in Australia and starting to promote different unique brands out of our site with different provenance stories, different attributes, and not hard sort of to pick on them, as you probably, I think we've discussed this before, but all of Omaru's lambs, 100% GMO free, 100% HB free, 100% antibiotic free, 100% grass fed, 100% traceable to birth. And I think we should be pushing for that as a nation, but that's another story. But it means that we're capitalising on those attributes and really pushing these unique brands that tell different threads of the New Zealand Inc. story. And it's really leaning itself very well to the current trend of moving to online and retail consumption. So had a massive uptake in the last few months, which has been fantastic.
Jared, this probably might be a hard question to finish on, but what's the light at the end of the tunnel that you're focusing on that does have some positivity and optimism for our farming audience listening?
I think we've got a fantastic story still to sell. We are COVID-free from NZ. We've got growing global population, protein shortage. We've learned to be even more adaptable in these recent times, or showing us how adaptable we are, I should say, maybe. So I think there's a lot to be positive about, where people need to continue to eat, and the reality is they can't eat trees. So we're in a very good space.
What a wonderful way to end it there, Sales and Marketing Manager for BX Foods, Jared Breyer. And of course, if you haven't read the Stuff article from Dr. Anne Salmon, the title was Let Them Eat Wood. So very much very in line with what Jared's saying, and in line with my opening, I think, as well, around, we're on the ship. It might be quite a stormy conditions, but if we can keep an eye on land, we can weather this together, because as Jared reminded us, all those fundamentals do not change regardless of this COVID situation. We're sitting on a huge opportunity with what we do here in New Zealand, producing some of the finest food and fibre in the world. Now, that's all we've got time for tonight, because we have to change channels. For 8:30, of course, is the second online launch party for Shepherdess magazine. If you haven't heard about this magazine, check it out online and you can subscribe. It is the most beautiful celebration of rural women's stories from particularly New Zealand, a very, very first in its kind. And you can join us tonight to hear from 4 wonderful women, the gorgeous, lovely Lee McNeil from Pukatoro Station right up in Gisborne, to Rebecca Dwyer down in South Canterbury, the wonderful Kate Hoswell from the brand Hippie, and of course out of the Wairapa, and Sarah Gubb there with some fantastic honey that they're doing. And you can hear from all of the ladies. Join the conversation, pour yourself a wine, head over to Shepherdess YouTube or Shepherdess on Facebook. I'll be there from 8:30, and of course we will do this all again tomorrow, Ceres Country, 7 p.m. Thanks to the wonderful people at Farmers Weekly for supporting Ceres Country and bringing you the latest on the matters that matter most to rural New Zealand. Now, as if you haven't checked out Ceres Country on podcast, you can take us with you on demand anywhere you are around the world. And of course, I'm loving your feedback coming into my inbox. Send me an email, sarah@perimedia.com. And of course, I am getting a lot of direct messages on my social media with some very good points to interviews you may have heard and particular guests I should be hitting up. And I certainly do take them on board and follow through on them. I really appreciate the community that we're growing around Ceres Country. So that's all we've got time for tonight. So good night, go well, and know that we will weather this together.
This is Ceres Country.